If there is one country which has a neighborhood which is as hostile as Israel does, it's India. What are the lessons countries like India and Israel as well must learn from this terrible intelligence and military failure to ensure that the kind of attack the Hamas was able to pull off against Israel never happens again, and most certainly doesn't happen in India? To talk about that, I'm joined on this special roundtable by Frederick Landau, former combat leader in the intelligence special forces in the Israeli Ministry of Defense, has been senior advisor to the Ministry of the Interior in the Israeli Parliament. With us is Glenn Carl, former CIA officer, deputy intelligence officer for transnational threats, author of The Interrogator. He's an American expert on national security and foreign policy. With us is General Syed Atta Hasnain, well-known Indian military general, former military secretary, has commanded the Indian Army in the Kashmir Valley. N.K. Sood joins us, former officer in the Research and Analysis Wing. And I have Abhijit Iyer Mitra, senior research fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. I want to start by asking Abhijit first. From an Indian point of view, Abhijit, what do you think is the main lesson India needs to learn to ensure that what happened Saturday in Israel never happens in India?
Thank you, Rahul, and thank you for having me on. Look, the main thing is hubris, taking things too lightly, and most importantly, an over-reliance on technology. Technology is only as good as the person behind it. Technology does not ultimately replace the human being. I think this is something which we get very clearly from the breaching of the Gaza defenses and the breaching of the redundancies that happened after that. The initial patrols that came, which were lightly armored, were taken out by light drones, and then, those same drones took out the heavier tanks when they came. We also need to, be very clear about how we handle intelligence. The problem with intelligence is, unfortunately, Bollywood and Hollywood movies give a very wrong approach to how intelligence is. If you watch one of these movies, it's like, Rahul, let's go bomb that. And that's the smoking gun kind of thing. That is not how intelligence is. It's kind of like when you cook, you can make 100 different dishes out of the same set of onions, garlic, and what have you. The final product is completely unknown. You don't know how to fuse the data, how to fuse the intelligence and things like that. Of course, I'm simplifying it a lot for our audience, but there is much more attention to be paid to intelligence out here. I would point you to several reports from 2015, 2016, and 2017, which actually showed several Pakistani tenders for the kind of paramotors that Hamas used on the 7th October attacks going out. We still haven't factored that in. Remember, for the last 2 years, we have had drones, Pakistan using drones to, paradrop things onto across the border. Again, we still don't have comprehensive measures to deal with those as well. The thing is, I know this sounds awful, but it's good in a way that a lot of this has Hamas likes to publicize its atrocities, because it gives us a lot of ammunition to learn from and not repeat the mistakes that we see we need.
Frederick Landau, given the fearsome military and intelligence capabilities of the Israeli state, an attack of this nature was quite inconceivable. And of course, there'll be commissions of inquiry which will look threadbare at every error in the system. But from what you've gathered so far, what do you think are the most important lessons Israel needs to learn to ensure that nothing remotely similar ever happens again?
So I think that we have learned our lesson, and we are about to act upon the lesson that we had on the morning of our Sabbath on the 7th of October. And when I say that, what I mean is that for many years now, basically since 2005, when the government of Israel decided to pull out all of its military forces and thousands of its own civilians out of the Gaza Strip, which was a decision aiming to start a peace process again, hoping that the Gaza Strip will become, quote, the Singapore of the region. Now, since 2005, we have been trying to keep peace in the region. But ever since 2005 and our own pullout of our forces and our people, rockets have been fired onto our towns. Terrorist attacks have been happening throughout this almost 2-decade period. And on the morning of the Sabbath, I think we got our final lesson that we can no longer look at the Gaza Strip as an entity, as a country, which will act like all other countries or entities. And what I mean is that the governing body, which is the terror group Hamas, has no interest in its own people's well-being, prosperity, or well-being. What I'm trying to say is we will have to annihilate the Hamas on a terror point of view, that they will not be able to bear arms, they will not be able to exist as a militant terrorist group, and they will no longer be the governing body of this Gaza Strip. Now, Israel has not yet decided what the end game of the Gaza Strip is. But what we do know, that it can no longer be a base for this terrorist organization, which is mimicking ISIS and being funded and armed by the Iranian regime. They must be dismantled. They must be part of history. The same way that the world defeated ISIS, we will do the same to the Hamas.
General Hasnain, you've fought terror groups in India. You've looked at the ISIS internationally. Is there anything at all in India, whether it's the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Hizbul Mujahideen, that you think comes remotely close to the Hamas? Not in this attack, nothing does, but even before, given the kind of military capabilities the Hamas had, what comes closest? Could something like this, in your view, ever happen in India? What do we need to be most wary and aware of?
See, Rahul, first of all, thank you for this very interesting discussion. As to your main question, so far, really not demonstrated. But that does not mean that it cannot be demonstrated. After all, 26/11, who expected it? Did anyone expect an attack of that kind? That was not conventional war, I agree. But if that kind of a thing can happen in secrecy, many more things can happen. The interesting aspect of the situation prevailing in Israel, on the Israel front at the moment, is 50 years ago, what was done by Sadat in the Yom Kippur War is being repeated in a different way by Hamas. The tripwire, getting in from the Gaza border, not going beyond 3 to 4 kilometers, only going for certain targets, waiting for counterattacks to happen, looking for hostages and getting hostages, appreciating Israel's considered weakness that they will never want their own citizens ever to be lost. And they will go after anything, so they're waiting for the response. This is going to be a very, very difficult situation for them, this particular aspect of the response.
You mentioned 26/11, General Hasnain. Now, 26/11 had a group of terrorists who'd been trained by the inter-services intelligence in Pakistan.
Correct.
When you look at the manner and the military precision and the organization with which the Hamas terrorists attacked, do you think it seems inevitable that they had military minds and trainers backing them, that a terror outfit by itself cannot attack with this level of precision?
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. I'm sure there must have been sponsors. You see, there's been denials across the board. Iran has denied it, everyone else has denied it. But obviously, and today's world is a world of mercenaries. Today is a world of all kinds of other people under arms. There are a huge number of people who are experienced in this kind of warfare. All could have been involved in this. Technologies. These kind of organizations are not particularly adept at technologies, but they have acquired them. They have got the wherewithal. They've got the human resources to come and train them. You've seen power motors, paragliders, power motors and things like that. We have also had this intelligence earlier, as Abhijit just said. We have got this intelligence earlier, and lots of people were discounting this happening. Now with what's happening in Punjab, the kind of induction of wherewithal through the help of drones is something in the future which can be repeated with the human resources. There is also this whole threat which the Lashkar-e-Taiba had given a couple of years ago. Hafiz Saeed himself said Let 500 people try and get in across the line of control. Even if 100 get in and 400 die is acceptable. But we have never experienced it. But we got to remember, when a threat like this is made, someday it could very well be actually executed on ground. What I'm trying to actually say, Rahul, in a very short thing to you is, we in India can never go by that understanding, koi ladai nahi lagi hai. We are not at war. We have a habit very often of mentioning that there is no urgency because there is no war. We are actually at war 24/7.
Glenn Carl, the Hamas used in this attack some very unconventional attack choices, using paragliders to get across the fence, knowing where the observation posts were, using snipers to take down those who were on the observation posts, using pipelines supplied as material from Europe, turning them into Qassam rockets. Is this the level of finessing you think the Hamas as an organization is capable of? Or do you think they're really getting the help of proper military minds, whether it's the Iranians that we know in a proper inquiry, but do you think it's almost inconceivable that a terror organization could do something like this?
Well, we shouldn't really think of Hamas as a terrorist group. If what we think of when we say terrorist group is a small number, dozens, perhaps in the low hundreds of almost always men who are planning to blow up a bus or kill someone with a drive-by shooting or something to that effect. Hamas has always been much more than that. It engages in terrorism. That's a component of what Hamas does, but it's also a governmental de facto leadership, a political leadership, a social organization, and a philosophical movement. I put that in brackets too. So they are capable of doing and engage in terrorist actions, but then they also have a more conventional kind of military aspirations. They seek to be much more than people recognize them as being on the whole. That they have these conventional creative military capabilities at the level of training of individual combatants up to tactical and even strategic planning and capabilities is not a surprise at all. That they were so creative and successful obviously was a surprise in this instance. But otherwise, there's no mystery that Iran has been providing assistance and training for years and years. Now, that doesn't mean, and I think the evidence indicates that Iran has not been directly involved in this attack, but creating the capabilities in Hamas to do something like this, sure, that's not a surprise.
So, given the fact that Israel has such high-end human and technical intelligence capabilities, and that this wasn't a lone wolf attack, this is an attack with multiple fronts being opened simultaneously, how is it, according to you, Glenn Carl, that the Mossad, the Shin Bet, just didn't read all the dots that were being formed on the wall? I'm told by some geolocation experts that some of this training was happening as close as 4 kilometers from the fence that Israel has erected.
Well, sadly, tragically, I think actually this is an easy enough question to answer. During my training 40 years ago, I spent a number of days with the United States Marine Corps, as all of my fellow officer candidates did in the agency at that time, because the Marine Corps is responsible for providing the protection of official American facilities overseas, embassies. And the single problem that they had to deal with and must deal with every day is routine, complacency, boredom, and then lack of attention to detect the abnormalities that are the central point that intelligence services and security services have to look for. When you have 15 years of watching a wall, all of the measures you take cannot really overcome the almost unavoidable complacency or slow decline in the acute attention that one can pay when one's adrenaline is flowing. So I'm not surprised that the Israelis got caught short in this. Of course, it's a terrible thing. These are tragic mistakes with oversights with hideous consequences. But that is the single largest challenge for anyone providing security.
General Hasnain, we see this happen oftentimes during counterinsurgency operations or even during deployment on the line of control, where complacency sets in, or a particular Paltan or the troops that are out near the LOC just start getting fatigued, or they start believing that nothing's going to happen, and that is oftentimes when things go terribly wrong.
Absolutely, Rahul. We are subjected to what are called bat actions very often by the Pakistan Army in the pre-ceasefire days. And this was something which used to always keep the Indian Army alert. But despite that, there were moments when we were caught napping. I think one of the ways that we tried to overcome these issues was to create a belief among most commanders that the obstacle system was not impenetrable, that zero infiltration was never possible, that there will be some kind of an infiltration which will take place, 10%, 5%, and that we have to have a layered system. Now, in the case of the Israeli system, which I have visited myself and seen it, outstanding thing, it is not a layered system. Israel does not have the kind of depth to create a layered system. The system which we have on the line of control, which I have been commanding for years, is sometimes almost 50 kilometers wide, in which we have 4 or 5 lines on which we can actually limit infiltration coming in. So this is a major lesson. This is something the Israelis need to look at very seriously, because they believe perhaps that their wall or their system created through the wire obstacle is absolutely impenetrable.
Nothing is impenetrable. I think that's a good point you made.
You can have a music festival happening at 3 kilometers from the wire obstacle is something that just shows that complacency had set in.
Now, N.K. Sood, the Indian state is trying to build at this moment the capacities of the research and the analysis wing and the intelligence bureau at this moment, with no disrespect, nothing comparable to the Shin Bet and the Mossad. And yet an attack of this nature happens. From the perspective of India's intelligence agencies, what do you think are the most important lessons we need to learn right away, given what happened with the Mossad and the Shin Bet?
Actually, all the intelligence agencies all over the world, whether it is CIA, Mossad, RAW, or maybe KGB or anything, they are all dependent today on technical intelligence. Their human intelligence is failing, or they are not giving special attention to human intelligence. That is the reason why Mossad failed. And our adversaries or the terrorists, they are today more smarter. They used to use mobile phones, now they are not using. They used to use internet, they used to use Facebook, and even email, Gmail, Google or Gmail. Now they are not using that. So it makes our job difficult, and we have to find other ways. You see, the Mossad has a strength of nearly 7,000 people. That is a small country. And RAW, on the other hand, hardly has a strength of 10,000 persons. And we have disturbances all along our border, whether it is Pakistan, it is China, or even your northeast, or even you can say our sea coast, which is 7,516 kilometers long. But otherwise also, we are otherwise very cautious. I think we are doing well. We are building our army, we are building our navy. But I think our intelligence needs to be built up more. Today, we used to be very defensive all along our period. Now, for the past few months or maybe a year or so, this system of intelligence that has gone offensive, and that's why we are more protected than even the Mossad or Israel. But there's a lot of things that we have to do or learn. You see, India was responsible for the security of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We knew that ISI will kill them, and we specially took care that he is not killed. But when he was killed, it was 15th of August 1974. That's when our RAW chief, Aran Kao, he used to be holidaying only 2 days, when it's 26th January and 15th August. So in this case also, to attack Mossad, to attack Israel, they chose especially October 6 or 7 when they were celebrating. But the other, the disturbing factor is that they had been training, they had sent 1,000 jihadis on training, they were training in different fields, they were training in arms, they were training in paragliding, and not only in Hamas, but they were doing some training in, you say, Iran.
This is an important point,
And
the fact that you get over-dependent over time. We are supposed to be living in the tech and the digital age, Abhijit Iyer Mitra. You tend to get over-dependent on your devices and on what you think is smart technology. And if your enemy goes off the grid, if they're simply not communicating on the grid and you're looking at different radar machines, you're looking at your smartphones, trying to catch them, that becomes tough because they're not there. They could be in plain sight doing things which you can see if you just keep your eyes open, but you're looking at technology and not looking at what's happening in front of your eyes.
Absolutely, Rahul. So, the problem here isn't just the over-reliance on technology, it is the pace at which technology is progressing. It is going at a rate which is so mind-boggling. I don't think, if you remember, this is my phone right here. If you look back, 20 years back, what I can do on this one mobile phone, probably only the President of the United States had that kind of word processing, communication power, and it would have taken up the equipment of an entire Boeing 747 to get all that equipment together. Today, I'm literally holding it in the palm of my hands. So, technology is going so fast at the moment. Even the Israelis, for all their technological prowess, and they're a very tech-savvy country that focuses on subsystems, not on main systems, and subsystems innovations actually goes faster than systems innovations. In spite of that, in spite of seeing all the use of commercial drones like DJI and Parrot in Ukraine, they still did not factor in all of this. I think with new technology, the problem is your enemy outpaces you and they think differently much, much quicker than you do. This is one problem. The second problem is, to add to what General Hasnain said, where Israel doesn't have depth. So what they do is they combine multiple different kinds of sensors and fuse the imagery, or rather the product. So for example, there will be motion sensors, there will be infrared cameras, there will be ground radars and things like that to detect ingress happening. And the fences are electric so that when they're cut, it sends off a signal. They use this kind of fusion in the hope that their defenses will hold. Then the second redundancy is the light armored vehicles, the first patrols and things that come in. The third redundancy is the tanks and things that come in. That is how they view multiple lines differently, not in terms of space, but in terms of responses. The problem that we realize is, at least from the initial reports coming in, that the entire Southern Command had actually clustered at one place, which was one of the first places overrun. So it was almost a kind of a decapitation strike in a sense, where the command structure had been removed very early on in the conflict, which is why you will see that, when those horrible videos, we've all seen them from the Hamas channels, when they're going in and killing soldiers in military garrisons like Nahal Oz and places like that, the soldiers are in a state of unrest. They're in their underwear. They don't know what's happening. They're disoriented. They have no idea what happened. And I don't think they even realized, when a message goes out, infiltration has happened, get ready to fight it. The scale of this was unprecedented. Nobody could have imagined a scale like this. At some point, a mistake should be predictable with the benefit of hindsight. I think in this particular mistake, the scale of it is so great that even with the benefit of hindsight, we can safely say it was kind of unpredictable.
Now, the other thing that we're seeing, General Hasnain, is decoys. Whether these are cheap Qassam rockets activating the Iron Dome and inviting very expensive counter-fire, or using pipes to turn them into rockets, getting them across. We're seeing false radar warnings going off, people getting messages on their phones saying there's an emergency. Then it turns out that that was activated accidentally, as happened on Thursday. So all this seems to suggest that after a while, people will start wondering whether what the tech is telling them is actually correct or not, because the tech keeps malfunctioning, and then people start questioning the veracity of the tech.
Absolutely, Rahul. This is something which is very important. It's a very important point that you're making. Warnings of this kind repeated over a period of time, and probably Hamas had studied this extremely well, giving out warnings which are contradictory to each other, taking back particular warnings at a particular time, etc. All this leads to the confusion, and the command and control setup goes into a complete kind of a paralysis. One thing I can vouch for is we have been hearing about 5,000 missiles or whatever aerial means they've used. My visits to Israel did reveal to me that the estimate that Israel had 5-6 years ago of the kind of munitions which were held by Hamas and Hezbollah was to the tune of over 100,000. And they knew very well that the Iron Dome cannot, under any circumstances, withstand that or neutralize that. So I'm not sure what had they done to ensure that whatever leaked through, how were they going to look at that particular aspect? Because the destruction would be immense. And that's exactly what has happened.
Is this something, Frederick Landau, that's throwing people off in Israel? The fact that everyone's getting emergency SMSs only for the government to later clarify that this got fired accidentally. Radars keep going off. It looks jammed. Looks like even in North Israel there's a massive incursion taking place later. That turns out to be false as well. So how is this tech malfunctioning and Hamas's ability to beguile the tech, to send it on the wrong path, and to just confuse the hell out of what the tech is telling people?
So just let me explain. This has nothing to do with the enemy's capabilities. This wasn't some kind of a cyber attack. This was a man error. This was a complete mistake that took place in the war room, and the wrong message was basically sent out to all the citizens. Yes, it made us a little edgy. Yes, some people might have ran to their safe areas for no reason. But it's, as we would all say, better safe than sorry. But it's very important. The Hamas and the enemy have nothing to do with this. This was not some sort of a cyber capability or messing with our radar. The Iron Dome is working fantastically. Just take into account 6,000 rockets. 6,000 have been shot towards Israel, and only a few of them have actually hit the targets that they were aiming for, which is also important to mark out that these are civilian targets that they are aiming for. We're talking about people's homes. So the Iron Dome is working very well, but it is of course not the only answer, and we will have to go onto the offense to make sure that these incidents no longer happen. But to try and give credit to the enemy for playing with our systems through cyber or otherwise is just fake.
Okay, so you're calling this a human error, nothing to do with the Hamas, just somebody reacting in the wrong fashion. Glenn Carl, what can this attack potentially do to the psyche of the Israeli nation? Never imagined that an attack of this nature on Jewish people, on Jewish land would be possible. And the fact that now people are probably overreacting in panic, pressing off buttons, sending off emergency messages which aren't true, which again is a consequence or a side effect of the attack last weekend.
So again,
well, I think any people is I might not be the ideal person or the single best person to assess the Israeli psyche, but reasonably so. But if any nation is aware of the existential threats and hatreds directed towards it from time to time, and in Israel's case, without stop by Hamas, I mean, it's the Israelis. The charter of Hamas is quite clear, and we should take people at their words. They act upon their words, they believe them, which is that they want to kill every Jew and destroy Israel. That's not hyperbole for them. And the Israelis are not unaware of this. I worked closely with colleagues and friends in Mossad and the IDF, and that is their life mission to stop this kind of hatred from actually taking effect or being carried out. So on the psyche, I don't think there's a change in awareness of some of the threats. There might now be Unfortunately, the human inclination to respond excessively to a hideous series of acts, as the United States did after 9/11. The United States needed to respond, but our response created its problems themselves. Our response did. Similarly, Israel has a terrible dilemma now. As our colleague just said, they need to address the threat from Hamas. But how do you do that without actually exacerbating the problem and creating terrible strife for Israelis and for Palestinians? No one has come up with a solution to this in decades.
General Hasnain, you've got the challenge of the Hamas, and the Israelis have launched an all-out assault against the Hamas, and the idea is to finish the Hamas off forever in every form and shape. There's also the Hezbollah in the West Bank, and the concern that if the Hezbollah were to get involved, given the fact that they're a more formidable military force than the Hamas, how could that potentially impact the nature of this conflict? If you were a military man in charge in Israel, how would you be looking at the threat posed by the Hezbollah and the fact that there's been some firing between Israel and Syria? There's been some firing between the Hezbollah, firing mortars, the Israelis responding with artillery fire. How do you see that play out?
Thank you. Very good question indeed. I have visited the northern front of Israel, the Israel-Lebanese border, and I do consider that particular border to be of even greater importance than the southern border in Gaza. Gaza is a small border comparatively, and whatever Israel has to do in terms of response and reaction doesn't require a very large force. I only hope that Israel is not overreacting, bringing in too many forces down south, because actually a balanced disposition is very, very important at this particular time. If you denude your north, if you lessen your forces in the north, the temptation of Hezbollah will be very much there. And we know that there is a common sponsor for all these organizations. So there's always believe, continue to believe, I would advise Israel, that something from the Hezbollah, something from the northern borders can very well accrue in the manner it happened in 2006. And in 2006, there were many, many lessons to learn from that. In addition, I would also say one more thing as to your earlier question which you asked. The response in the psyche of the Israeli forces and the Israeli people. I think if you go back to 1973, the response by General Sharon and going between the two armies and getting to the highway to Cairo was something which was so innovative, which has never been tried out perhaps by anyone ever in the history of warfare. Now, that's the kind of thing which the Israeli armed forces are known for. And you can expect that something very innovative, which we haven't thought about, will probably emerge in the near future, even as this war pans out.
What could that be? Frederick Landau, what would you be most concerned about at this moment? Do you think there's a bright chance that the Hezbollah could get involved? How is Israel likely to deal with having to deal with the Hamas in Gaza, having to deal with the Hezbollah, and potentially even Syria?
So just to come upon the General's comments, we have, of course, fortified our southern borders, but our northern border is extremely fortified now, especially that we are not interested in a second surprise attack. Back in 2006, we had our second Lebanon war. We know, sadly, Lebanon very well. We know Hezbollah very well. But I think that a more worrying scenario would see a more active role taken by Iran. I don't think at this point Hezbollah are going to be active, but they are going to allow the Hamas Lebanese faction continue to shoot from the Lebanese border. But this is, I am sure, something that we can handle. But Israel, it is absolutely right, is trying at all costs to stop the option of a two-front war. And we, of course, want to focus on the current problem, which is the southern border and the dismantling of Hamas.
Mr. Sood, we've seen over the last several months several enemies of the Indian state being assassinated in mysterious circumstances. We had, one killing just yesterday, a Lashkar terrorist in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. We've had some of the masterminds of the hijacking of IC-814 being taken down. Pakistan and the ISI calling that a terrorist attack. Is that something that you think India should be wary of, the fact that there have now been multiple such instances of terrorists who are on India's most wanted list being killed in POK, and the potential of the ISI or some of these terror outfits wanting to strike back?
You see, the ISI had been disturbing India, Pakistan has been disturbing India for the past 40 years. And I think now our friends sitting in Pakistan are neutralizing our enemies. This is the kind of situation that we have to follow. This is the kind of the operations that we should be more aggressively following. And this is the kind of actions that we should take. We should not wait, like Israel, that when they come, we will see. We should go out, like, when they did Pulwama, we did Balakot, and we neutralized 300 militants. Similarly, we will have to do something big, without caring about that Pakistan is a nuclear powered country. And in this now, whatever has happened in Israel is a eye-opener for all the world, including the USA. They should not be waiting for 9/11 like incident to happen. When 9/11 happened, thereafter US started supporting India in Kashmir. Otherwise, US was a spectator, they were enjoying. Now, after this Israel-Hamas war, I think this will be an eye-opener for the world that Pakistan is a terrorist country, Pakistan should be neutralized, Pakistan should be finished, their weapons should be controlled by the US or other countries.
Sure. Abhijit Iyer, is that something that you're concerned about? All these most wanted terrorists should be neutralized in one way or the other last several months, and the potential that the ISI or these terror outfits themselves may say, okay, we think India did it and they may want to come and attack us?
Here's the thing, Rahul, the belief that somehow they will retaliate for taking out terrorists. They were going to come for us irrespective. See, they don't need an excuse to come at us. So it's not that they're going to come at us for taking out these people. But I would point out our Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar's statement that it isn't Indian policy. I suspect in most of these cases, Rahul, we need to remember there is a huge intersection between terrorism and criminality. Terrorism requires drug peddling, arms smuggling, all kinds of criminal activity to fund it, which is why, terrorists the life expectancy of a terrorist anywhere in the world isn't very long. In Canada, we know there was massive infighting in terms of, territory and things like that. In Pakistan, we know what is happening. There is, it's literally a museum of religious fanatical freaks who are at each other's throats. There are more Pakistanis killing each other than Pakistani terrorism kills outside.
Okay, General Hasnain, final words from you. Is this something you'd be concerned about, the possibility that they'll want to blame India, that, why would all these most wanted be killed one after another? Of course, India is doing it. India, of course, saying absolutely not, this is a ridiculous charge. Is that something that would be amongst your key concerns at the moment?
Rahul, not at all. I'm not concerned about it. As an Indian, I would not even hazard a guess as to who is behind doing all that. It just makes me happy that it is happening. For 40 years, as Mr. Sood just said, for the last 40 years, it's been happening inside our territories, and there has been total deniability on this from the other side. In fact, Pakistan has used denial as a weapon, a strategic weapon. I think the same denial is existing for us to adopt. We have to make sure that we continue denying this. Whether it is happening from our side or not is the concern of the government, not any of us.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground about what went wrong, the lessons we should learn, what India needs to be wary of, the lessons at large for the rest of the world. Frederick Landau, Glenn Carl, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, N.K. Sood and General Syed Ata Hasnain for joining me on this News Track Roundtable. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time deeply, gentlemen.